The second time I did it, I knew. That's what makes this one harder to tell than the others. The first time you make a mistake, there is at least the honest defense of not knowing. You didn't have the framework. You hadn't seen the pattern. You were navigating with the information and capacity available to you at that point in your life. That defense is real and it's worth claiming when it's true. I can't claim it for the second time. I had been in a relationship with someone who used conflict as a control mechanism. Not physical control, I want to be specific. Emotional control. The kind that operates through unpredictability, through manufactured crises, through the strategic escalation of disagreements in ways designed to keep you slightly off balance, slightly focused on the relationship's stability rather than on your own needs or observations. I recognized it. I named it in therapy. I did the work. I understood, specifically and precisely, how the dynamic had functioned, what my role in maintaining it had been, and what I was looking for that had made that kind of relationship feel, initially, like something it wasn't. I was proud of the understanding. I thought the understanding was protection. 18 months later, I was in a relationship with someone who had the same pattern. Different person. Different details. Same mechanism, running with exactly the same logic underneath a completely different set of surface presentations. The second person, I'll call her Dana, was nothing like the first in any observable way. Different temperament, different background, different aesthetics, different communication style on the surface. The markers I'd been watching for, specifically calibrated to the first relationship's presentation, were not there. What was there, what I was not watching for, because the map I'd drawn was based on one specific territory, was the same underlying pattern operating differently. This is one of the things that makes patterns so persistent, they don't repeat identically. They adapt. They find new hosts, new costumes, new initial presentations. The person who manipulates through rage the first time might next appear as someone who manipulates through withdrawal. The same function, completely different form. If you're looking for the form, you'll miss it entirely. I noticed something was off at about month 3. Not with the precision I'd had in the first relationship, not the sharp recognition of the mechanism. More like a low-frequency awareness that things were not adding up in some way I couldn't name. Dana was warm and the relationship was new, and I was telling myself the discomfort was my own history creating noise. The discomfort was not noise. It was signal. But I had recently trained myself to be skeptical of my signals when they might be old patterns, and I was applying that skepticism in a context where it was doing the wrong work. I was using hard-won self-awareness to dismiss accurate current information. The update had overcorrected. By month 7 I had enough clarity to name what was happening. The pattern was visible. Different from before, but unmistakably related. I left. Earlier than I had the first time, which I will count as progress. 4 months in the second relationship versus 18 in the first. The learning was real. But I had still done it again. Still entered something I recognized, eventually, as familiar. Still found myself inside a dynamic I thought I'd exited permanently. The question that followed me was why? Not rhetorically, genuinely. Why, after all the work, had I ended up here again? The answer, which required more therapy and more honesty than I was initially comfortable with, was this: the work I'd done on the first relationship had addressed the conscious level of the pattern. I understood what had happened. I could narrate it. What I hadn't fully addressed was the subconscious level, the emotional resonance that made that kind of dynamic feel, initially, like something familiar and therefore like something safe. The recognition in my nervous system before my prefrontal cortex had a chance to evaluate. The thing that had attracted me to the first person, that particular energy, that intensity, that feeling of things mattering, was something I had not yet updated my response to at the felt level. I had updated the narrative. The nervous system was still running older software. Real updating requires both the narrative and the felt, the understanding and the rewiring. The rewiring takes longer and requires more specific work: somatic therapy, body-based approaches, the slow practice of noticing the physical resonance before following it. I've done more of that work now. Not finished, I don't know if it ever finishes. But more. And I understand the difference, now, between thinking your way out of a pattern and actually, physically, experientially rewiring it. The second time wasn't a failure of understanding. It was a reminder that understanding is only half of it. The other half lives somewhere below language. And that's where the real work is. Here's what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable. It builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.